this is a nice time to start off a new initiative, which we call a C3, as you can see, Chennai Climate Consortium. This was started about 3 months back, so you can say it's still a baby. This is why I looked at these balloons and I said, oh, this looks like a birthday party for a baby. And then I realized we are a baby ourselves, just 3 months old. So the C3 is a baby, it's just starting, but the idea behind C3 is, it's called the Chennai Climate Consortium. Even though we all realize climate change is critical, we got to do something, and I don't have to tell you all the things that are happening. Many of you are professionals, and there are some end users as well who have an equally critical need today to go low carbon. The pace is very slow, for various reasons. It could be policy, it could be economics, it could be technology maturity. But one thing we felt that could hasten or accelerate the process of decarbonization could be if we can have a geographical focus. There we look at cities. For each city, we bring all the stakeholders together, the key stakeholders. And the 3 key sets of stakeholders we see are, one is the solution providers. There's a lot of solution providers here, I'm very happy. The second is, of course, the end user. And the third is whom we call as support providers. It could be consultants, it could be EPCs, it could be innovators, it could be R&D, it could even be the government. Idea is if we can get all these people together, but focused around the city, can this kind of an acceleration be enabled? Can decarbonization happen much faster for those cities? So that is the idea of Chennai Climate Consortium. It's a multi-stakeholder collaboration platform. I'm glad to have Mitesh, Juan, Vineet. We have one more guy, Ramesh. He might hopefully land up soon. We are the co-members of this right now. We are driving it. The idea is to see how we can evolve this over the next 6 months to a year into something that really produces value on the ground. As part of that, producing value on the ground, we feel workshops like these, very, very short, very, very focused workshops, small, 20, 30 people, half a day, but getting all the key stakeholders for that particular solution. Today's solution is industrial energy efficiency. If we get this together as a workshop, we feel change can happen. That's the idea behind today's workshop, and that is C3's background. I would like each of these guys to spend maybe a couple of minutes to say the thoughts about C3. I would like Juan to spend some more time because he has been a key driving force motivating all of us to push things faster. So this is the inauguration as well of C3. So in a way, I think I'm glad that we are all part of a crowd of a start of something that hopefully becomes pretty powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, like Narsi said, I think we, along with Ramesh, will be coming in soon, started this off about 3-4 months back when we were ideating actually for something else. This made sense, and I think the reason is for energy efficiency to move forward, it requires first principles thinking, that is thinking from the fundamentals, root causes of a problem. Nari end users are thinking like there are solution providers, but to map the right solution provider to the right end user and the right solutions requires first principles thinking. Just now I was speaking to Mr. Shivaram Pillai, and he was telling the way Proclean is energy efficient is not just by adding, it's not very straightforward as adding panels on the roof or, there are a lot of straightforward solutions, but it also requires process changes in how they manufacture their products. So I think those comes in from first principles thinking, and I think that hopefully is the intent of Chennai Climate Consortium, to provide the right map of end users and consultants by first understanding what is the problem required and what solutions make sense for each end user. So yeah, we're super happy to see how this goes. Yeah, so Illumina is a pretty young firm. We are about 300 employees. We are consultants primarily for the US market. We provide engineering solutions for the power and construction sector. So on the power, we focus on solar, battery farms, EV charging stations, wind farms, and very similarly, on the construction sector, we provide solutions only to LEED certificate. So we are a sustainable engineering firm in our core. And even for construction projects, we take up only projects that are trying to go behind LEED certifications, like airport projects. We've taken the Williamson Airport, Hobby Airports in Texas. We have taken up the metro stations in Texas, Houston. So we are consultants, very similar to, I think, what Chennai Climate Consortium is doing. We as a firm are trying to do that in the US market. And hopefully the goal is to see if that can be done for different sectors in the Indian market. We are starting off with Chennai as a focus and trying to create a template where a lot of different cities, I think, can replicate.
So my interest in this comes from my earlier avatar with solar, right? So 18 years, I think it's 18 years ago when we started solar, there were lesser number of people than this, and none of us knew actually what we were doing. Right? Somewhere from there, I think for 3-4 years, maybe things didn't look like things was moving much. Right? It was about 14 years ago. And then suddenly when the momentum started, people were rushing in, but thankfully those guys that were there having coffee for 4 years kind of knew each other and knew what was, had a little bit of a head start in terms of policy, in terms of thinking, what will work, what will not work, what's the noise, where's the signal, so on and so forth. And that helped build companies that you hear today, Renew Power, I know most of you like, Azure Power. All these guys were sitting in a room having coffee 18 years ago, doing nothing. Pretty much talking. I mean, Sumant was not even there in the room then. Jumped in later, but that's one hero. So they named these companies Green Infra. All these people were there, right? And very similar, if not smaller audience. Policy was not there. I mean, I think, if I remember correctly, Gujarat was the first one. We were all there in Gandhinagar actually trying to do the policy at that time. So started from there, and what I've seen in India, the good and bad, is if there is momentum and the policy kicks in and a reasonably favorable environment, and even better if there's no unfavorable environment, things take off. Right? I think that's how we all been tuned to survive and succeed. So given that, I think this is orders of magnitude larger in terms of the scope. So we have taken on something even more daring. But again, what one I've been with Tuan, interacting in various forums and various work together in various these policies. Maybe 10 years, maybe 10, 11 years we've been. And I remember how the effort he put. I think he'll talk about it, but I remember vividly what he did before getting solar in Auroville, right? So what we used to joke is you have to convince everybody from the lineman to the chairman. Right? So it's a very common joke, and actually government people started joking with us, saying, the lineman chairman has come, so Tuan has come. So, right, that is the joke in the EB. So you can't convince the minister and chairman and get things done. And I'm sure this whole space is like that, right? Climate tech, everything is going to be like that. So how do you convince the lineman and how do you convince the chairman? I think C3 is the idea that we go all the way from lineman to chairman, because there's a lot of money also chasing this. That's what I was telling you. Right? So there's various stakeholders, there's a lot of money. People really don't know what they're doing. And they don't even know where to go. And you put a larger crowd and say sustainability and do something little more fancy, you'll get 150 people. But likely, everybody is talking, sharing articles, doing this, posting, I don't know which social media, and wasting time. So instead, we'll try the different thing. Get the serious people so that there is some exchange, there is thought process sharing, and they know who to call when these opportunities come, which doesn't look too far off. Today it looks like, oh no, maybe this, that, but when it comes, it rains, it pours. It's like that usually. Any one state government opens up in a big way. I mean, the central government now is focused. I think in policy environment also way more conducive than what I saw 18 years ago. Right? And this whole climate tech thing is likely maybe 2, 3, 4 years. I think now the buzzword is I mean, that is dead. So this is reborn as Ecosyn does this thing, right? So the new avatar. This time I think we know what not to do, right? I mean, if we tell you we know what to do, I think most of us will be lying and run away from people who tell you they know what to do. But likely we tell you 10 things not to do, that mostly when you figure out what to do, you'll be reasonably successful. So what will also be good, Narsi, as we continue, I mean, just to know who all the stakeholders are here, right?
good morning, everyone. I would like to share with you a little bit of my personal journey with energy in general and with sustainable energy in particular, and then leading to the C3. I made my first short circuit at the age of 5. So my mother had gone for shopping, and there was a girl from the neighboring house who was supposed to look after me. And I found a piece of wire laying somewhere on the table, and I just put it in the socket. And the current was so high that even the fuse of the feeder pillar in the street blew. So, and I was still alive, but it was an insulated wire. So I just put it in the socket, face and looked directly. So there was an attraction with electricity right from the age of 5 already. In the terms of sustainable energy, in Auroville, which is in Tamil Nadu, we have already standalone solar without grid connection since many, many years. But the grid-connected solar started in 2012. So VNET was also there in a very interesting meeting, which I still consider to be the day on which a very important seed was planted. So at that time, the State Planning Commission was headed by Lady IS Officer Shanta Sivanaya, a very dynamic person, who had also been instrumental in getting the rainwater harvesting going in Chennai. So I had spoken to her several times saying, like, listen, everybody is talking about solar, but it is again the big stuff, the megawatts and big utility scale. What about rooftop solar? So she said, I can call a meeting for this, and then you please make a presentation. So in that meeting, VNET was invited, the chairman of TEDA, there were a few directors of TANGEDCO, and there was the energy secretary was there. And I remember giving only a 20 minutes presentation, at the end of which I said that we are willing from Auroville to do 1 or 2 pilots without any cost to government, with only one request that you allow us to connect to the grid on an experimental basis. So we did those 2 pilots. In fact, one of them is the house in which I live, and the other one is a school building. And we connected to the grid. Of course, there was no bidirectional meter available. So we put 2 meters, one forward connected, one backward connected. So 1 meter would show the import and 1 meter would show the export. And jeep loads of TNB engineers came, one after the other, because they were all wondering, how is it possible that the consumer is supplying power to the grid? There was a very big fear for the unknown. There was a fear for the unknown. There was not a lack of goodwill. Let's be very clear. There was goodwill. But how can this happen? And don't we need separate cables from the solar plant to the transformer? And one engineer suggested that all the poles to which the solar energy is flowing have to be painted in green. There were all sorts of requests, all sorts of proposals, but there was a basic goodwill. And then in 2012, October, came the first policy, the Tamil Nadu solar policy, which included rooftop grid-connected solar. In November of the year after, it took 1 full year, the regulator came with the first regulations, because the policy needs also regulations. And then it still needed about 3 months' time for TNEB, TANGEDCO, to come up with instructions to their field staff that how should you go about when somebody applies, what is the application form. Fortunately, I had made an agreement, an informal agreement with the then chairman of the TNEB, Mr. Rajiv Ranjan, who gave us a draft of those work instructions before giving it. And luckily we did that, because the work instructions were about 45 pages, and there was a mandate in it that for every application of rooftop solar, the junior engineer or the section officer had to make a load flow study. Now the poor fellow had never heard of a load flow study, of course. Anyway, to make a long story short, we reduced that from 35 pages to 5 pages, just keeping the basics. And TANGEDCO accepted that, and then in February 2014, people could finally apply for rooftop solar grid connected with net metering. So that was that phase. Now, of course, there have been many ups and downs with rooftop solar. There was a very big movement in 2019-20, where TNEB had decided, 90% decided, to do away with net metering and replace it with gross metering. Gross metering means you supply all the power to the grid. So we worked with them at a pretty high level, with chairman directly, for about 9-10 months to save the net metering or to go for net feed-in. Net feed-in means You can still consume the power, but for the export, you don't get an adjustment, you get a payment. We did not want to go for gross metering, and our basic argument was, when a consumer puts solar, primarily it is for own consumption, not to compete with utility scale. So that resulted in the Solar Policy 2019, which has net metering still for domestic. It has net feed-in for the non-domestic consumers, but all tariffs can apply for it. That is 2019 Solar Policy of Tamil Nadu. Then came a very big new challenge in 2020, when the Ministry of Power came with a draft, no, not a draft, yes, first a draft and finally a final notification of the electricity consumers' rights regulations. What are the rights of the consumer? So it had a lot of very good paragraphs, lot of good clauses, that, a meter should be replaced within a certain time and all this. There was one little clause, 14, which nobody had noticed, and which was sort of embedded between all these other nice clauses. And 14 said that any prosumer, means consumer solar system above 10 kilowatt can only be in gross metering. It was horrible, because it would again mean the end of the the end of the rooftop solar. Now, by some miracle, I call it a miracle, a joint secretary of the ministry was visiting on 25th December, just 3 days after this notification had come, was visiting out of it. And I invited him home, and he joined me for lunch with his wife and 2 children. And he was kind enough to call the real joint secretary in charge of that particular subject. And I explained to that person that this is going to be a disaster. And we got into dialogue, emails, and then they amended that after about 7 months. It took still 7 months, in such a way that now net metering is available up to 500 kilowatt, not 10 kilowatt, and above 500 kilowatt it is net feed-in or gross feed-in if the consumer so chooses. So what I'm trying to say with these stories, every time you think you have arrived, there is a new challenge, right? So you can never go asleep and say, oh, it's all fine. There's always somebody out there to try to. So why is this happening? Because the utilities, they see consumer solar energy as a threat. They see it as a threat. But I think to some extent we have succeeded in at least some people in TANGEDCO to tell them this is an opportunity and not a threat. Why? The reason is the following, that you will see that over the years, TANGEDCO will become increasingly only a distribution company. Already a lot of the generation is happening by private parties, right? In fact, if you implement the Electricity Act properly, you should have separated distribution, generation, and transmission. They have only separated, they still have the generation and distribution together. Once they separate them, there where TANGEDCO has a real monopoly is in their network. Nobody else has a network like they have. So we keep on telling, make your money from transporting electrons from point A to point B. Whether those electrons belong to a private party, belong to somebody else, doesn't matter. That's where you own the highway. And a highway operator never says, oh, if the vehicle is green, you can't come on my highway. You should welcome them all. So slowly that awareness is also coming up. Now, coming to the C3, how I think we could make use of this huge opportunity. When Narsi and Vinit and some of us were working together in the earlier stage, I would consider it was the stage of advocacy. We had to convince policymakers, we had to convince the public at large that there is actually a problem. I think we are coming towards the end of that phase. I think everyone now knows that sustainable development is a must. Everyone has seen the effects of climate change. Very strange weather patterns we have. We have suddenly a rain in the middle of the summer. You can see in California all the wildfires. It's in the newspaper every day. So we don't have to convince anymore the public at large that there is a need of sustainable energy. That is done. The policymakers also themselves, as human beings, also realize that something has to be done. Now we come to the second phase, which is implementation. So the way the C3 has been conceived is, why can't we focus, starting with Chennai, to bring together end users who want to go for a sustainable future and experts and consultants who can help them in doing so. That is the first program that the Chennai Consortium, Climate Consortium wants to implement. There is a new requirement. If any one of you is exporting to Europe, for example, you will soon find that you will have to pay a carbon tax in Europe if your product is not complying with certain green criteria. So actually, I am going to another conference after this where we are meeting with the Madras Chamber of Commerce and some entrepreneurs who already are going to face that problem. So they need sustainability for a purely business reason also. If your product is not green, you can't export it, or if you export it, you have to pay a penalty, a tax penalty. So today we have the advantage that the awareness is there. Everyone has understood we have to do something, and the next step is now implementation. So we do hope that the Chennai Climate Consortium, or C3 as we call it, is going to become a platform where we bring together people who want to do something in that sphere of sustainable energy and those who can help them in realizing it, and create a platform of exchange of knowledge. And today the focus is on energy efficiency, but it may also go beyond that. And therefore, for the efficiency of time, I will stop talking now.
Thank you, Tuan. I think, I wanted him to kind of spend some time setting the context. Only thing I would add is everything is coming together. We don't have to convince most of these key stakeholders anymore that they have to move, whether for personal reasons or whether because the real idea has sunk into them. The only thing I would add is all these are coming together. We are getting stakeholders together with a geo focus. So that is the last part of the recipe. As I said at the beginning, we are hoping that all these things converging together, if we are able to also add this ingredient of city focus, can this make a huge difference? So in a way, just to conclude once again, the inauguration part, it's an experiment, but we are all very excited to do this experiment because if this succeeds, oh well, this is going to take some time to figure out whether it succeeds. We know that all of these B2B stuff takes time, but we are looking at a year's period to run this. Events like these, there will be many more of these as we go along, small focused events. Hopefully around the same time next year, hopefully we'll be meeting either in this room or some other room, and we'll tell you how much we have succeeded. But if we succeed, I think as he said, it's a beautiful template, not just for Chennai, for 5,000 cities around the world. Thank you, gentlemen.